Man, hey, so talk about this weekend. We just finished Romans. We finished 38 weeks of Romans.
We did.
Ah! Like what a wild year. Like just kind of rolling through Romans. Like, man, talk a little bit about how you're feeling like the day after where you're just like I mean, you ran the marathon. You went, more than half of a year like through some of the thickest theology in the Bible and came out the other side unscathed, or it's seemingly unscathed.
Yeah, it definitely has made me view 2025 as a almost like a spiritual season.
Mm-hmm.
I would guess, give it a few years, you already can tell that people will reference this season as the year we went through Romans.
Yeah.
And I do think being able to view it as that, as like, hey, we went on this 38-week journey. Here's where we started. Here's where we ended. I can see kind of so many different ways it's impacted me personally, things that I found super beneficial, whether that's on a spiritual side of things or whether that's even on a professional side of things. How it has made me even just consider ways that I can continue strategically laying out the teaching calendar in a way that creates a more intentional spiritual formation opportunities for our people. So love that. I would say really proud of the church. It comes with so much information.
Yeah.
There were some weekends where I'm like, guys, here we go. And I just thought the endurance and maybe even the stamina of the church to just stay with it. We've talked before, this hasn't been a season of like explosive growth, but there is a clear and noticeable like uptick. And there's obviously a momentum that's building at Northview, and it's just happening so organically, and it's coming by way of things that probably for the last 15 years in the church world have been viewed as non-church growth strategies.
Sure.
Like if you're going to grow your church, the assumption has been, well, you definitely don't do a thorough, just shy of a year-long study on theology and doctrine, and but that's proving to be, there's a shift, and I think that's a hunger in people. I do think Scripture says what can be shaken will be shaken, and sometimes God allows life to come with some tremors, and it's those earthquake moments, whether that's COVID or just all things, points of tension within our culture that shake our lives a little bit. And I think over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been enough shaking of things for people to realize what they've been placing their hope in.
Sure, yeah.
Couldn't get the job done when it needed to, and couldn't withstand the pressure or carry water over time. And so I think people are starting to definitely take their faith more serious. Like, no, I want to know what I believe. I want to be able to engage in productive conversations with people. I want to learn more. And so I love that. I think it's always more enjoyable to cook for hungry people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think preaching feels the same way. You can sense when a congregation is showing up going through the motions, and you can sense when they're showing up ready. And I can't remember the last time I've seen so many hard copy Bibles and people taking notes in church the way we have in this season. And really that is a trend at Northview that has been sparked by our young people.
Yeah.
They are hard copy Bible journal carriers. And yeah, I get people coming up to me like, just informing me on different like little milestone things that I think are cool. You know, I had a couple come up to me this week and they're like, Pastor, this is such a dorky thing, but we wanted to show you. We purchased study Bibles for ourselves. We never owned a study Bible, and you mentioned yours. And so, man, we went out and got new study Bibles. And then I met another family, and they come up to me, and you can tell the guy's like a fairly stoic guy. And they're like, Pastor, we got to tell you something that just happened for our family, which was like a real cool moment. Like, you know, we've always been in church and probably been around for like 20 years. And they said, and today during worship, not when there was a, hey, at this moment, everyone raise your hands, or not one of those moments, but there came a moment in worship where the dad, for the first time on his own, raised his hands in worship.
Yeah.
And the whole family like noticed, was like, whoa, like what's going on? And, you know, anyone who has been in a family where God gets a hold of dad's life in a powerful way, it's noticed and felt by everybody. And so this family comes up to me and they're telling me this awesome story about dad kind of leading out in worship in the auditorium this weekend. And so those things are just becoming more and more frequent. People are very proud of their life groups in this season.
Yeah.
Like the conversations have changed. People are truly like doing life together. So in fact, Riley's game this last week, she misses her game because she ends up in the hospital. And there was a whole small group of people who just decided to like, hey, let's go see Riley Johnson play basketball tonight. And so this whole small group shows up, and obviously they discover Riley's not there. None of us are there. And their whole small group just decided to stay and watch the whole game. And then together there on site at the school, took time to pray over Riley. And
wow.
I just think there's like really cool people all around us, but it's definitely a season of spiritual momentum, I feel like, for our people. And Romans was a big part of that. Excited for this next year and what that's going to look like. But yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really cool. When you guys, look back, I'm actually really curious as to, you know, we talked about like the different kind of, I don't know, the pace of going through Romans, and how some of it was a little bit of a slog. It was just like, oh my goodness, this is really thick. It's a lot to, you know, take in. Do you guys have like a favorite part of Romans as you go through like this series? Was there one part that you were just like, man, I'm loving this chapter, I'm loving these verses? Yeah, because I mean, you get down to the end, and I mean, the last three were all like, hey, Eutychus, and hey, this and that. I mean, it's just like shout outs. It's like, how do you preach that? But somewhere there in the middle, you have like a favorite?
Yeah. Aubrey, did you have one that you want to jump in on?
I mean, I actually loved the first whole half of it. I mean, I loved all of it. You know, I loved all of it. But I loved the first half, the way that you gave all of us tangible things set. Like, so I'm one of the proud life groupers. I love my life group. We meet every Monday, me and my girls, like they are my people. And I would say that our year grew exponentially. Like, it was just formative. The way we got closer, the way we did life together is vastly different this year than the year we did before. So I love the whole first part because we still are referring to, you know, peace is the destination, grace is how you get there. But my favorite was the pinwheel. I don't think I'll ever forget you on Saturday night trying to figure out how to draw the pinwheel for the first time. You're like, I think this is how I do this. And one, I also have loved that it's been behind you every time you've preached, because once we put the notes up on the screen, the pinwheel is like directly behind you. But it's just more and more grace, hope, peace, love, grace, hope, peace, love. I've had the opportunity to hear you preach for many, many years, most of my walk with Christ. And so there's just a handful that stick out. And that moment I think was my favorite through the whole Roman series. I will forever wish you spent more time in Romans 8, but yes. I loved the whole, I mean, I just thought this was the best, for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think 2 weeks on Romans 8 was terrible planning. It was I blame Easter, quite frankly. I knew, like, okay, if I have any say here in nudging this, if I can land on Easter with the declaration of Romans chapter 8, nothing can separate us from the love of God. It's just a great way to, cross the finish line on Easter. But it gave 2 weeks, which just not enough time. I would say in terms of feedback, one, I think most people really were made aware for the first time during this study that the book of Romans has to, in many ways, be read like a debate. And Paul he's going to market with his faith. That's the language that we use throughout this whole study. He's sitting down with a group of people, addressing culture, addressing religion, addressing philosophy. And so when you understand the context he was doing that in and how he was doing it, it makes it almost made the letter come to life in a more culturally relevant way of like, oh, so the same way he was addressing things in the Roman Empire, well, we bump into similar dynamics now. Mm-hmm. And here's how he was presenting his faith in a way that was well thought out and considerate of those he was addressing, but very persuasive and concise. And so I think that was great. Early on, the number one thing I heard from people was, man, did I have the wrong understanding of the wrath of God. Mm-hmm. The number of people who, in fact, maybe I can find this. There's a one quote early on that I read. I think it was Leon Morris. Let me see if I can find this. He says it so good. Let's see. Yeah, here's the quote. He says, the wrath of God is often confused with that irrational passion we so frequently find in man and which was commonly ascribed to heathen deities. But thank God that is not what the Bible means. God's opposition to all that is contrary to his very nature is not thunderbolts from heaven, but letting us have it our own way. He goes on to say, you want to keep crossing the boundaries. You want to go with the flesh of godlessness. You want to cooperate with the forces that oppose my way. You want to live with self at the center. Okay, I grant you your wish. This is the wrath of God. And I think for people to come across some of the daunting language in the Bible, it's in us to assume that it's a threat. Like, oh man, he's out to get us. We better watch our back. It's just not how God is sending the message. It is a warning, not a threat. And so that distinction was something that I heard a lot. The other distinction was between a wage or a gift. And you could just tell in this season, so many people were being set free from a very performance-driven mindset and even some superstitious religious beliefs where a lot of people found, hey, I'm approaching God like I'm trying to balance the scales and pull his heartstrings to make him like me. And when you discover that it is all a gift, has nothing to do with your performance or you earning it, that is so liberating. And that comes with that distinction of earning versus receiving, or achieving versus receiving. So those were big ones. I think the part that was difficult I still don't know if I taught it well, would be the section where, it definitely, probably most pointedly, chapter 6, 7, he gets there again in chapter 11. Anytime addressing the law, he's pressing out what would be referred to as antinomianism. And antinomianism is this belief both the Jews and the Gentiles were assuming, oh, so is he doing away with the law? Is he basically saying the law serves no purpose? And Paul saying, no, you're missing it. Christ fulfilled the law, but he does not do away with the law. He does not now disregard this standard. He establishes it. And so that's where the whole idea of us living on a firm foundation of an established law, where essentially our goodness is extra credit. Well, that definitely showed up, and where it shows up is most specifically in one area, and it's always around giving. Why it's always around giving? Well, I'm sure it has to do with where your treasure is, there your heart will also be. And I just think it's interesting how that always comes to the surface. But people will say, okay, well, because the law has been fulfilled, I no longer live under the law, so I don't have to give, I don't have to tithe. That was a law thing. And that would be antinomianism. It would also be a pretty big blind spot in terms of inconsistency and borderline hypocrisy, because really you don't apply that way of thinking to any other area apart from giving. You don't say, well, now I can kill whoever I want because I'm no longer under the law, and that thou shalt not murder thing. Well, that's a law thing, and I'm not under the law, so I can murder whoever it doesn't play out. We only play that card when it comes to giving. And I think there's probably some opportunity to just circle back on the importance of godly living and Christ-like standards, and how the pressure is off. We are liberated and free. If we come up short, God's not mad and out to get us. But every single day we live motivated by gratitude to just give it our best attempt to honor him. And what you discover is grace produces in us a higher level of righteousness and a purer form of righteousness than the law or religion ever could. In other words, we take on more integrity because of grace. We take on more purity because of grace. We take on more hospitality because of grace. Grace raises the bar. It doesn't lower it. And when people hear some of the things Paul says about the law, what they're thinking he's doing is, oh, this is great news. He's lowering the bar. Yeah. He's not lowering the bar. He's saying because of what Christ has done, he's taken the lid off. And now this grace can empower you to live beyond your capacity. And that, I do think, tucked in there, the pre-leading conversation to that is what Aubrey just mentioned. Chapter 5 is where the whole pinwheel came out of, and just how much wind the gospel puts at your back. And in that text, he makes the statement, there's more, there's more, there's more, there's more. And he's talking about the glorious riches of Christ, which, again, we also tied to grace, GRACE, God's riches at Christ's expense. And so those are things that I would say I was noticing in the conversation. I was noticing when people were giving me feedback. Those are the things that were sticking. The chapter 4, how righteousness was credited to Abraham through faith, how God worked through the patriarchs as the children of the promise, specifically how God's sovereign choice leaned towards Isaac, not Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of God honoring his word to Sarah. Guys, the number of people, in fact, I had a conversation with a Muslim family at a church. This is now a couple weeks ago. And they said someone had sent them the message. And like, hey, my pastor talked about this. You should check this out. Is where I talked about, there's these two camps and they're century-old debates and tension, and it all centers around land, law, Lord, and lineage. Which one is it? And I think for most people are like, oh, well, that's why he chose Isaac, because he also made the promise to Sarah. And that one small detail, Paul pulling it back to the prototypes of Abraham and Sarah, and how the plan of redemption is a byproduct of simply faith and trusting in God, not works related. I think all that was just seeming to come as new or fresh reminders for our people. The thing that I hope we also take away is Paul ends and he says, guys, it's so amazing. It's so beautiful. It's so valuable. You have to protect it. Yeah. You have to keep it healthy. You cannot go all in on the faith if you do not go all in on the family. Yeah. Your spiritual siblings. And I think that's going to be a true statement of our church.
Yeah. Excuse me, man. I really like the doctrinal versus debatable conversation. I feel like there's so much of that, and when you talk about the family of believers, like there's so much of that is like splitting the unity of the church, is taking those debatable matters, elevating them over everything that brings us together, and then uses it to kind of pull us apart. Like, but it's also the one where I feel like that's because they're not. It's debatable, but they're not easy issues to just say, oh, well, this is the right thing. That's why they're debatable. I think when we land ourselves in a camp, sometimes we think that the debatable issues are very easy to see. And we're like, oh, yeah, well, it obviously is this way. But I think you said, and maybe it was on the podcast, like there's smarter people than us that have debated either side of these issues for generations. There are guys that have gone back and forth and landed on either side of them. I mean, even when you get into like the Calvinism and Arminianism debate, like there are super intelligent people that come up with different conclusions. And yet that has absolutely split the church just as much as, carpet has split churches over years. Yep. Carpet colors. But I think just being able to, keep the conversation going is the big thing. Is like, are we still talking, or have we just built up our walls and we've, gotten up on the ramparts with our, arrows and everything like that, and like now we're in our box, we're going to stay there. How do you think, and probably a question for both of you guys, like how do you think we get through some of those differences that, really just kind of stop all conversation?
Yeah, I think it does require relational equity. And that's where Paul's rooting it in a family conversation, saying your spiritual siblings. And I do think when you have trust and rapport and there's some continuity there, I think people are willing to sit in attention with one another. And I would guess that one of the number one marks of maturity that is noticeable on our church in this season is the growing ability to have necessary conversations in productive ways. And I mean, I hear people now having like full on like crucial conversations and leaning into some really not flammable, but the stuff that's really created some passionate arguments over the centuries. And they're doing it in their small groups, and they're figuring it out, and they're realizing some of us come from different traditions, and some of us were taught this differently, and some of us have different experiences even. So I think the relational equity piece, I do think humility is a big part of that. Obviously, Paul references the mystery of the gospel multiple times in Romans. The moment we start to assume that there comes a point in the faith where we are done with mystery, we just set ourselves up for frustration. There's always going to be things that we need to hold with open hands and to just walk with humility and gentleness. And so I think humility, equity in the relationship, but I would guess this study, and I'd probably close with this, has laid a foundation for our church. And I would guess that 2026 will be a year of just tremendous growth and momentum for our church. And it's going to be because we took a whole year to stack hands and say, all right, here we go. This is what we align on. So to anyone who calls Northview home, man, it has been so fun getting to be your pastor this year. This has been a team effort, and we did it. We went through the Believer's Constitution, passage by passage. We read the whole thing. We taught to the best of our ability the entire thing. So God's awesome.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, we're getting ready to flow into another exciting season, getting into Christmas. And man, we're just super excited. Hopefully everybody kind of jumps in. Like Aubrey, I know you've got some special stuff planned for the Christmas season for us here at the church. And we, I don't know if we've even talked about it, but we're going into the Christmas carols. Like we're talking about Christmas carols throughout the season and the deep theology that there are in the Christmas carols, which is super, super cool. So hopefully if everybody's like with us, man, we're going to have a fun season. Make it to church, make it to the house, and it's going to be awesome.
And bring a friend. Let's see what God can do.
This is a great time to invite. Yeah. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. And we will see you next time on the Nothing But Net podcast.
Yes.
A lot of basketball today.
Yeah. Go team.
Got to go.